afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here in Delhi with all of you this afternoon. I know I'm standing between lunch, and even I'm pretty hungry, so I'll be also brief and precise. It serves our interest. Okay, the topic, while we were talking broadly about the innovative payment system, what I'm going to touch upon is slightly different from what you have heard other speakers discuss so far. Broadly, what I'm going to look at is how do you see this entire e-commerce to m-commerce journey transcend? And obviously, what is it for bank? A lot of times when we look at and what I call ET evangelist, because a lot of people learn economic times and they start reading so much about certain stories, especially the flavor of the season, which is e-commerce, m-commerce, wallet, payment banks, etc., etc. That it just starts becoming at times bigger than what it is. So I'll just first break this with some data to tell you about when I look at this entire space, which is m-commerce, comes from two words, mobility and obviously e-commerce. Now let's take a quick snapshot and see from a mobility perspective where we are. As a country, we today do close to 92 lakh crore per annum of cashless transaction. Out of that 92 lakh crore of cashless transaction, 1 lakh crore, which is close to 0.5%, happens through mobile. So it's a very, very small percentage of the total cashless transaction. That doesn't mean that it's not growing. Yes, it's growing fast, but it's growing fast at a very, very small base. If you look at even this 1 lakh crore, which is, as I said, close to 0.5%, where is this transaction happening? 34% of this transaction goes on for utility bill payments. Close to 30% goes on the prepaid top-up. And 26% of that is domestic remittance. That adds up to 90%. So what is left of it is 10%. And 10% is what probably, even if you look at that as a whole, goes on to the e-commerce/m-commerce. So if you break this now, I think the picture becomes clearer. That e-commerce and m-commerce, which is the front page story, so often we all start believing that that's the big thing. When it comes on from the payment perspective, contributes less than 0.05% of the total cashless transaction as of now. The data was just to demystify the facts from what we all get over enamored by. Similarly, let's look at the e-commerce part of it. Now it's projected that this year we'll have close to 22 billion, that's 1.47 lakh crores of transaction that will move to e-commerce. The share of mobile will be about close to 25 to 30% of that. Now, of the total transaction size, which I just spoke to you about, 45% continues to be cash on delivery. 21% is debit card, 16% is credit card. 17% comprises net banking, bank account, and wallets, all put together. Now, if you look at this size, wallet comprises less than 7% of the total transaction that originates from mobile. While again that base, as I said, over like mobile, it's growing fast, but as of now, it's relatively very, very small. Third data, what is driving the entire e-commerce? We'll all probably say it's Amazon and Flipkart and Snapdeal, right? Because that's what we see more often in terms of offers and ads and front page ads all over and big day sale. The reality is the e-commerce is not driven today by any one of them. The single biggest e-commerce portal today in the country is IRCTC. You all know that, right? That's the single largest. Total e-commerce volume, close to 70% of the e-commerce business is driven by travel as a sector. They don't discount. There are no freebies. You don't see any ads. What we see ads of are the business models, some of them, I'm not saying all of them, are not essentially the ones that really solves a customer problem, but because they have a product, they are searching for customers who have a problem. And once we start demystifying this entire approach, I think for banks and financial institutions, the picture becomes a lot more clearer, because I'm often surprised, and no offense to any bank out here, banks are mindlessly going and saying, oh, we have also launched a wallet. My question to them is, why are you launching a wallet? The bank account is the single largest wallet. The problem with a bank account today is because of either a two-factor authentication or security or the friction on checkout, we probably found that it's better to create a wallet. Why can't banks start creating a frictionless experience? Because wallets was a business started by those who never had a banking license. They wanted to get into the payment space, and the only easiest entry for them was to get a PPI license and get into a wallet. But you see, half a dozen banks today, they are in wallet. I'm not saying that that's a wrong strategy to follow, but the question again is, why not do this, make your bank account far more seamless? So looking at this picture, I think clearly there are 4 or 5 key themes. Some of those have been touched since morning. I don't want to get into any of those in detail. I think what is going to create and is creating a great frictionless, non-wallet based payment solution to drive this entire transition from E to M commerce is combination of your mobile ID. Today it's possible for you to create a seamless checkout using a new technology, which is a mobile ID, where you don't need a two-factor authentication. UPI, hopefully once it moves from a P2P to P2M, would again be a great benefactor to people who have either the issuing side or the acquiring side capability in today's business or ecosystem. Banks today in India have not started to move into an API banking space, but I look forward to, and I'm sure at Kotak we are working, and a lot of other banks would probably be thinking of, is to create a new tech architecture for banks to make their entire channel access through an API route. Because moment we build a mobile SDK and the API banking, it's far easier for any of the e-commerce players to directly integrate with the banking system. Today you go to any of the sites and they give you a sign-on using Facebook and Twitter, right? Why? Because Twitter and Facebook have made their APIs available to anybody to use that for a sign-on perspective from credentials. I think today the biggest challenge is banks. At times we start looking at the risk with such microscope that even when there is no risk, we stop some of those innovations. Today, when you want to check out anywhere, I think what do you need? You need to know your balance. The banking API, just like when you go to any other bank ATM, you can check your balance. Why can't I, when I shop or check out on any site, I know what is my balance before I pay? But banks will not offer that API as on date. So I'm saying as the banks start looking at their entire architecture, this is going to get integrated. I think another great initiative through the Bharat Bill Pay system is going to make, again, the entire billing, because today less than only 10% of the billers are paid online. That itself is a huge opportunity when we are trying to look at a one-time or two-time shopping on an e-commerce site. You pay almost half a dozen bill every month. You don't need any bigger use case than to create a transaction which is sticky and happens 72 times a year, because there's no other purchase you make as often as you pay your utility bills. So as we see all of this, the journey that I look at back in Kotak is, we are working closely to say banks cannot do all of this of their own. I think banks are trying hard to say we are going to build. Reality is, I think there is an emerging ecosystem. The emerging ecosystem is happening between the telcos, and that's where you have seen telcos and banks joining hand, especially in the payment bank license, including we have tied up with Airtel as a payment bank, so are other banks. We are looking at a very close coordination with fintechs and bank. As Rajnish spoke about the chiller experience, I think that's a great example of how MobMe as a fintech company has started going out and getting banks to join that movement. Hopefully more banks do join. E-commerce, and I think banks are starting to bring some semblance together, because there has always been a war of who owns the customer. A lot of e-commerce players, they started launching their own closed wallet, semi-closed wallet by acquiring some PPI companies. Everyone started having ambition to be in every space. Telcos wanted to be in payment, e-commerce wants to be in payment, everybody wants to do banking, bank wants to become e-commerce place. I think there seems to be a lot of flux about, where do you draw boundary, but I believe some amount of sanity is setting in. There is a collaboration that has started to happen. We have started to see that because we have gone and integrated quite a few e-commerce players into our mobile app, creating a seamless transaction, and thereby driving the overall volume and throughput. I think many such examples are happening, and of course, what's happening in terms of the government, from the direct benefit transfers to the UDAI initiative. I think all of this put together will create a much stronger ecosystem for banks as we see the whole thing forward. What's also going to create a better experience, and some of that is already there, is what mobile provides you as a technology. I think the entire experience of a geofence solution, about knowing the proximity to where you are and what you can do in the proximity. I think what Zomato's and Ubers have done, there's a lot more of that one can expect by creating a seamless connect between a banking app and a lot of e-commerce and commerce apps. Similarly, augmented reality is again something which has not been tested here much in India, but I was in Australia some time back, and I was surprised to see that Commonwealth Bank of Australia, which is the largest bank in Australia, it was a government bank till about 12 years back. Today is the single largest mortgage issuer in the country. The way they drive is because banks have enough and more customer data. Nobody else has more data than banks have. I think what banks are building there, and this is what CBA has done, is using customer data and the proximity data of the properties that are available for sale and rent. They married the two through an augmented reality. You flash the camera from your phone on any of the building, and it will tell you if there is a house available for sale, what's the price, whether you are entitled for the loan, and you can click and you can complete your transaction then and there. So I'm saying the possibilities are far immense for the banks to start leveraging, and of course what you can use through your camera functionality. I think the entire OLX model today is a classic example of what a camera can do to your business model, or what Lenskart and others are planning to say. You put your face and we will suggest a frame to you, and you can test probably 100 frames at the comfort of your home. So I think all of these, as we start looking at it, will continue to emerge, but the reality today is the sectors which are matured, which is the travel, hospitality, will continue to drive, because these are the sectors which are growing at about 56% compounded annual growth rate year on year since 2009. We have done this by integrating, and within about 6 months, we have seen the entire flight and hotel booking share move up from less than about 100 transactions to close to about 12,000 transactions per month. Now that is the kind of a volume that you can see by solving a problem that really exists. And I think that's where banks have a large role to play. Banks also have a responsibility when we are looking at m-commerce to talk about the lesser served. I think we heard some interesting business models. We also launched an app some time back called Kotak Bharat Banking. Now Bharat Banking is the first of its kind app that's an offline banking app. So it works without internet connectivity. You don't need data. It's a multilingual app, because that's again a challenge of Bharat that we are trying to solve, where beyond 300 million of Indian population, majority of them, they don't speak or understand English. So how do you bring banking to the language that they speak? And of course, fund transfer, as we all spoke about. How do you create an offline fund transfer where you don't have to be dependent on an agent or an outlet or a data connectivity to send money? So I think problems like these have started to give us pretty good response. I know I got a message 2 minutes, so I was about to wind up. I think with all of this, some interesting solutions like, as I said, on no bandwidth, low bandwidth, security, multilingual, analytics, all of these combined with the collaborative design insight is going to ensure that the banks are here to play the game not surrendering it to the companies who are getting into the payment or the wallet space, because you can own only one part of the customer journey. And let's understand, payment is just one part of the journey. Payment is not the journey in itself. I think the amount of data that banks have, with big data and analytics that banks have embarked on, I think there lies tremendous opportunity. And nobody, and when I say nobody, means none of the companies or organizations or industries in the country have such rich data set about customers as banks have. So making this journey, making this transition, I think if we are agile, if we understand customer insight better, a lot more is possible. Thank you very much.